"Jump," the voice in my head said, as I stood in front of the bedroom window, looking down to the hard ground below. I was 10 years old and feeling desperate. At that time I did not know I would grow up to become a successful architect. Luckily, I didn't jump. The year was 1943, and I was at boarding school in Surrey, England. I had been sent there on the eve of the outbreak of World War II after my mother fell ill with the serious lung disease, tuberculosis, TB. It was a nightmare from day one. At home in Italy, I was the youngest child in a traditional, loving Italian family. My father was a doctor. His ancestors were English, and he was very passionate about Britain. He bought all his clothes from England and named me Richard instead of the Italian name Riccardo. My mother was a potter by trade, and our family was moderately well off. My brother was not born until I was 15. I was greatly adored by my parents and grandparents, which made boarding school days even more lonely. At school, I was an Italian in a very English school, and at that time during the war, it was very difficult. I remember having to learn English, which was painful. The other children would laugh at me. In those days, no one had heard of dyslexia, so everyone put my lack of learning down to stupidity. My only aim was to be second to bottom rather than bottom. I had just one big advantage. I was big for my age and I was a good boxer, so I was able to protect myself. Even today, at the age of 77, I still practice my boxing in my spare time to keep fit. At school, I fought my way to the top, to become school boxing champion, and earned friends and respect from my peers. I had a couple of close friends who supported me and made my school life bearable. When I was 13, I changed schools for a year. For me, a change was almost as frightening as being beaten and bullied. But my new school was like a miracle. It was a tiny school with only 20 students, and all the children had foreign parents. Being in a small group freed me. Suddenly, I became one of their best students. In that 1 year, I caught up by 2 years and went ahead a further 3 years. I also got better at sports. One of my teachers was an ex-priest, and he gave me some sound advice which helped me to play cricket. "Don't worry about the style, just hit the bloody ball," he would say every time I missed. I followed his words, and it worked. Soon I was hitting 4s and 6s. During that year my reading also improved. I had been a late starter when it came to literacy. Whereas most children in my boarding school were reading at 6, I didn't pick up my first book until I was 11. And then it was a simple cat sat on the mat type book for young children. At my new school, the teachers encouraged me to practice my reading, and I got to the point where I was able to read Charles Dickens books like Oliver Twist and Great Expectations. Although I wasn't as fast as other 13-year-olds, I could read any book. I left that school after a year and went to a public school for boys. And from that point, I learnt very little. By the time I left at 16, my housemaster's report said, "This boy must leave now and should never go to university or any further education." He suggested I should join the police and go to South Africa. What he really meant was that because I was a strong boxer, I would be able to handle a police baton. At that time, South Africans were living under the apartheid system, where blacks were forced to live separately from white people, and there was a lot of racial tension and violence in the country. I didn't take the advice of my careers teacher. On leaving school, I joined the army for 2 years, which was compulsory as part of the national service. There, I continued to box.